Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode. Today we're going to talk about something I think many of us desperately need. Yeah, at least I know I do. And it is something I personally have been making every effort to do, every intentional effort to do. And on the last episode, we talked about the weariness of the soul and we asked a difficult question of, is my body tired or is my soul carrying something it was never meant to carry? And we looked at how sometimes we can be physically exhausted because there is something deeper happening within us, and how our souls become weary from carrying fear, being yoked to disappointment, rejection, hypervigilance, self protection, anxiety, and the weight of trying to control things that were never ours to control in the first place. And in the middle of that weariness, Jesus gives us a beautiful invitation in Matthew 11:28. And he tells us to come to him. No, he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And I really love that Jesus does not say, "Come to me and I will make your circumstances easier or better." He says, "Come to me and I will give rest for your souls." And so today I want us to explore a beautiful, beautiful question. I want us to I want us to explore another question. What does it actually mean to live a rhythm of rest? What does it look like to live a life of rest? Because when we hear the word rest, most of us think about sleep, taking a day off, going on holiday, vacation, sitting on the couch for a weekend and literally doing nothing. And those things can certainly be forms of physical rest, but there is a deeper rest that Jesus is inviting us into, and that is soul rest. And soul rest is not necessarily the absence of activity. It is the absence of striving. It is learning to carry responsibility without believing that everything depends on you. It is learning to move without being driven by urgency. It is learning to wait without feeling like you are falling behind. It is learning to say, "No, I have done what is mine to do and I leave the rest for God. I trust that God will do his part." And as I was writing the book, I Dared to Wait, I came to a realization that completely reframed how I understood rest, that the original rhythm of the soul was rest. And if we go all the way back to the book of Genesis, we see that Adam's first experience of life was not striving, it was belonging. He did not wake up wondering if he was chosen, if he was loved, if he was enough, if God would provide for him, if he had to secure his future. He simply existed. And life flowed from communion. Adam did not have to manufacture anything. He did not have uh, to manufacture any source. He lived from what God had already provided. And this is what I mean when I say the original rhythm of the soul is rest, because Adam did not reason his way into peace. He lived from it. He did not search for identity. He was formed within it. He did not strive to be chosen. He woke up every day already knowing that he was chosen and that he belonged. And there was no hypervigilance. There was no fear of abandonment. There was no overthinking. There was no need to manage and control everything. And the soul just thrived because it was rooted in communion and it was shielded by God's covering. And life continually flowed from intimacy and not performance. And then after the fall, that communion was broken and the soul became displaced. And what had previously been sustained by intimacy began searching externally for life. And this is where striving entered the human experience. And one of the lines I wrote in the book was that striving was not born from ambition, but from loss. And I think that is important, because sometimes we look at striving and simply, we say you need to stop working so hard, but we don't always ask, what are you trying to secure with that hard work? What is the motive behind the hard work? Because striving can be a response to loss. If I don't feel secure, I will begin striving for security. If I don't feel chosen, I will begin striving to become desirable. If I don't feel loved, I will begin striving to earn affection. And if I don't trust that God will provide, I will try to provide everything for myself. And I honestly think that one of the most revealing things about a weary soul is that sometimes rest actually feels dangerous. You would think that when you are exhausted you would want to stop, but sometimes the opposite happens. You become more alert, you become more vigilant, you become more controlling, and you are always planning, always preparing, always thinking about what could go wrong, always trying to stay one step ahead. And you can't quite stop trying to figure out the future. And you might call that wisdom, but sometimes it is actually fear disguised as responsibility. And to stop feels like surrendering to the very thing you are trying to outpace. And I know this because I have lived it. I had always been a builder, mentally alert, emotionally vigilant, spiritually striving, always planning, always preparing, always keeping watch, always being in control. And I had to confront the fact that I had been carrying things that were never mine to carry. And the Bible tells us in Psalm 127 that unless the Lord builds the house, they will labor in vain, those who build it. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And that verse interrupted my self reliance. And honestly, I had honestly reached a point where I was tired of trying to build on my own. I was tired of trying to hold everything together, because if God is the builder, then I don't have to be the glue holding everything together. I just had to let go. And that is one of the hardest lessons of rest that I had to learn, that I am not God. I do not have to anticipate every danger. I do not have to secure every outcome. I don't have to know everything before it happens. I don't have to carry my future. I have a shepherd. And there's an old childhood song that gets to me. And it says, he's got the whole world in his hands. 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 And I began to think that if God has the whole world in his hands, then it means he also has my entire life in his hands. And me trying to carry my own life in my hands is me taking it from his hands and telling him I can do it on my own. I can do it better than him. And that is really humbling. And it brings me back to Jesus when he tells us to come, all who are weary and heavy laden. Jesus is not telling us to get our lives together and then come. He's not telling you to sort your life out and then come to him. He says, come to me just as you are. And then he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Become joined with me, walk with me, become yoked to me and walk together with me. And this is so beautiful, because Jesus is not necessarily inviting us to stop carrying everything. He is inviting us to stop carrying everything alone. Rest is not the absence of responsibility, it is the exchange of burdens. And I had been yoked for so long to control, to fear. Trying to control outcomes and making sure that I am not shocked, by any outcome, to hypervigilance, with hopes that I can secure a future and not get hurt. I had been yoked to self protection, building walls so high and setting boundaries to avoid getting hurt. And I did not realize how heavy those things were. And Jesus was not asking me to do nothing. He was asking me to walk with him. He was inviting me into a rhythm of companionship. And just close your eyes for a minute and imagine Jesus telling you, hey, 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 I know this is heavy and hard, but you don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to carry all this weight on your own. Come to me. Let us do this together. And that is the beautiful invitation in Matthew 11:28, companionship, trust, walking with Jesus, because rest does not come from urgency. Rest grows in trust, trusting that God has your entire life in his hands and trusting that he knows the plans he has for you. And Psalm 23 is a beautiful scripture that says, David says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. No, he leads me beside still waters. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And God being the good shepherd he knows how important rest is in our lives. And sometimes he makes us lie down because our constant motion is a symptom of internal anxiety. There are times when God does not simply invite us to lie down, he makes us lie down. And in the book, I wrote about how the shepherd interrupts our momentum by creating circumstantial enclosures like seasons of waiting, a stalled career move, a season of transition, a closed door. Because if we keep running and striving on a fractured soul, we will eventually shatter. And sometimes God making you lie down can be painful. It is painful. But look at it this way. God is literally slowing the external world because he is trying to settle something internally. And in the book, I wrote something about how in the Middle East, if sheep graze in the high noon sun, they quickly overheat and bloat. And so, to prevent this, a shepherd uses his staff to apply gentle pressure, nudging the sheep to fold their legs and lie down in the shade. And so, rest then is not just a gift, it is a clinical necessity. In the noon of our lives, when the pressure is highest and our internal temperature is rising, the shepherd makes us lie down. He interrupts our momentum because grazing in the heat of our own anxiety will eventually poison our system. Yeah, and that is the bittersweet gift of rest. And you might see rest as weakness because it looks like surrendering to the very thing that you're trying to avoid. But scripture gives us another picture that rest is actually trust. Rest is saying, God, you are still God even when I stop. You're still God over my life, that my life will not collapse because I've rested, that the world will continue turning even when I am not trying to control it, that I don't have to force what God has not released. And this is particularly important in waiting seasons because waiting exposes our relationship with control. And when you don't know when something will happen, you are tempted to make it happen. When you don't know who is coming, you are tempted to settle for whoever is available. When you don't know what the future holds, you are tempted to create your own future. But waiting asks us to trust the shepherd. If he is leading you, you are not behind. And that became one of the deepest truths of my own waiting season. And honestly, I don't think rest just naturally comes. It is something you intentionally make effort to get. Hebrews 4:11 tells us, let us make every effort to enter that rest. And Let us make every effort to enter that rest. Make every effort to enter rest. Isn't that strange? But maybe it's not as strange as it sounds, because it takes effort to stop striving. It takes striving to stop striving. It takes an amount of courage to sit still when everything inside you is telling you to do something. It takes faith to resist the urge to control an outcome. It takes trust to let God be God. And sometimes the hardest thing you can do is not intervene. And not because nothing matters, but because you are learning that you are not the one holding everything together. And that is why rest is not passivity. Rest is a spiritual discipline. It is restrained authority. It is saying, it is coming to a place where you say, I could grasp, I could get what I want, but I choose to trust. I could force outcomes, but I choose to wait. I could manipulate, but I choose to surrender. I could run ahead, but I choose to walk with God. And that is why I love this line from my book where I say, waiting is not wasted time. It is where God restores the image of the soul. Only someone who is secure can afford to wait. Only someone who trusts the shepherd can lie down. And there is one more reason why I think we can actually trust Jesus with our weariness. Hebrews 4:14 to 16. Let us then hold firmly the faith we profess, for we have a great high priest who has gone into the very presence of God, Jesus, the Son of God. Our high priest is not one who cannot feel sympathy for our weaknesses. On the contrary, we have a high priest who was tempted in every way that we are, but did not sin. Let us have confidence then and approach God's throne where there is grace. There we will receive mercy and find grace to help us just when we need it. We do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have a high priest who has been tempted in every way, just as we are. And Jesus tells us to approach to approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in time of our need. I really love this because the person who is inviting us to rest is not someone who is unfamiliar with weakness. Jesus understands 100%. He knows what it is to be tired. He knows what it is to grieve. He knows what it is to be misunderstood. He knows what it is to feel the weight of what lies ahead. He knows what it is to be pressed. He knows what it is to walk through suffering. And yet he remained completely surrendered to God. So when Jesus says, come to me, he is not saying it from a place of distance. He is saying it as one who knows what it feels like to live inside a human body, to experience the limitations of humanity, and to carry the weight of obedience. He is not ashamed of our weaknesses. He is not irritated by our weariness. Hebrews says that he sympathizes with our weaknesses. And then it says something even more beautiful. Let us approach the throne of grace with boldness, the throne of grace, which means that when I am weary, I don't have to hide from God until I feel strong again. I can come while I am weak. I can come while I am tired. I can come while I am confused. I can come while I am afraid. I can come while I am still learning how to surrender. And what do I find when I come there? I find mercy and I find grace to help me in time of my need. And maybe that is what some of us needed to hear today. I know I do. I know I needed to hear that. You don't have to become strong enough to rest. You can come to Jesus in your weaknesses and let him meet you there. The shepherd understands the sheep. The high priest understands our weaknesses. And the Son of God says, come to me. So maybe this is where rest begins, not with having everything figured out, not with finally becoming emotionally invulnerable, not with knowing what tomorrow holds, but with coming to Jesus exactly as you are and saying, Lord, I am tired and I cannot carry this by myself anymore. And allowing Him to carry you, allowing Him to walk with you, allowing Him to take that burden off and just carry you. And maybe this is where I want us to stop for today, because perhaps the invitation of rest is much simpler than we make it. No, it's simply just come. Come with the things you have been carrying. Come with the future you have been trying to secure. Come with the outcomes you have been trying to control. Come with the things you are so afraid to surrender because you don't know what will happen if you let go. Come tired, come weak, come strong, come uncertain, come just as you are, because you have a high priest who understands your weaknesses and a shepherd who knows how to lead your soul into rest. And perhaps the invitation today is simply let Him carry you, let Jesus carry you. Because if God really has our lives in His hands, then we don't have to keep taking our lives out of His hands just to make sure everything is okay. We can trust Him. We can lie down. We can breathe. We can stop running. We can stop trying to outpace the very things we are afraid of. We can stop trying to build everything ourselves. Because unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And maybe some of us have been working so hard because we have forgotten that we have a shepherd who goes before us, a shepherd who watches while we sleep, a shepherd who knows when we need green pastures, when we need still waters, and when we need to keep moving, and when we need to lie down. And maybe that is what this season is teaching some of us. You don't have to pace the flow of your future because your shepherd has already walked it. You're not behind, you're not forgotten, you're not responsible for holding everything together. And you don't have to know how everything will work out because you can trust the one who holds it all. So if you are in a season of waiting right now, perhaps don't ask only when is this going to end. Maybe ask, what is God teaching my soul while I am here? Because waiting is not wasted time. God can use the waiting to teach you how to trust without controlling, how to desire without desperation, how to hope without anxiety, how to walk without rushing, and how to rest without feeling guilty for it. Maybe the thing you thought was delay is actually care. No, maybe the stillness you thought was abandonment is actually an invitation to lie down. Maybe God is slowing the external world because he is trying to settle something internally. And one day when you look back, you realize, I thought God was delaying my life, but He was actually teaching me how to live it. So today, I want to leave you with this. Rest is not the reward you receive after the promise arrives. Rest is the soil in which the promise grows. And when you finally trust the shepherd enough to lie down, you discover something humbling, that you are never holding your future together. You are being carried all along. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of Plugged. And if this episode spoke to you, I hope you will share it with someone who might need this reminder today, that they don't have to carry everything alone. And until next time, may the good Lord keep you. Thank you.